We have Lilith van Biesen, who is a certified technical architect, and is going to share with us what does that mean. Because Lilith began her CDA journey in 2018, and she had a really quick journey because she passed the board in June 2021. So she is currently working as a principal Salesforce architect at Capgemini, and she does this amazing work by also supporting other aspiring CDAs. And she's a SIMA group organizer, and she shares her knowledge in the community a lot. So Lilith, it's all yours.
Awesome. Okay, then I'll definitely do that. So let's see, you should be able to see my screen. Yes, awesome. Okay, so first, before I actually get going, I have to make one minor correction, which is an oddity due to the way that this exam works. It's not something that you could know is wrong. But if you look at my, certification verification, or if you look at my Trailblazer profile, you'll see that I passed the board in June. It's not technically entirely correct, because actually I had a retake on one section, which I did in September, but because of Web Assessor and the way that it's set up, it shows up as June. Just, to be fully transparent with you guys, I wouldn't, want you to have the wrong idea. I didn't pass on the very first try. That would have been even more insane, but okay.
Thank you, Lilith.
So yeah, what I wanted to talk about is just, the CTA, what is it exactly? Because it has a lot of attention, a lot of focus on it, but I see that there's a bit of confusion here and there. And also it's a bit tricky to know what it's about or what you need to do when you're not really in this pool of people who are talking about it nonstop, the way that Miriam, Yonida, Kid, and myself are, this is our life now. So we know very well, but outside of that bubble, it's not always that clear. So what do I want to cover? So first of all, what is the actual CTA? What are the steps to take? Because it's not the same as a multiple choice. It takes a bit more. There are some prerequisites also to it. I will cover two in a bit more detail, because also they are not that visible on the pyramid. Then I want to have some disclaimers like, wait before you start. This is important information to know. How do you prepare? Mostly interesting, of course, for people who actually intend to go for it. And then finally, misconceptions with a lot of cat pictures, because yeah, I want to keep you guys, So the first thing, the certification. So let's talk a bit about it. So it was launched in 2011. And as far as I know, there's about let's say now maybe 400 CTAs worldwide. I don't really have the full numbers. They're not released. So I don't know. I can't really tell you. I don't even know which number I would be. The only thing that I know, just, from talking to people, that it seems to be that there was no female CTA within the Benelux just yet. So check. Now there is. What is the exam? Well, it is a multi-step exam. So first you have to go through this pyramid, which you see here. You have to get all these prerequisites. So then you become an application architect, a system architect, and then you're eligible to go actually to the next phase, which is then evaluation, which I will cover. It's like the review board exam, but smaller. And then you have the actual board, which is quite daunting, to be honest. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and it takes mostly a lot of practice. So is the certification really a technical thing? Yes and no. You need to know a lot of information, a lot of background about what Salesforce is. You also need to know a bit more, a bit broader. For example, systems that Salesforce might leverage, such as data warehouse or middleware. So it's a bit broader than just knowing Salesforce, and it's split up into these 7 domains. Now, why are these important? You have to pass all of the domains in order to successfully complete the exam. And if you pass all of them except for 2 or 1, it's you can get a retake. So it's, again, a bit different than the way the normal exams in Salesforce land go. And it's also not a multiple choice. It's really in front of a board. You have to talk a lot to a panel of very, very smart and somewhat intimidating judges. So what are the steps? Let's walk through it. The first thing you do is climb the pyramid. And if you're anything like me, a bit naive maybe, when you start climbing the pyramid, you're like, I'm making such good progress. And when I'm at the top, that's just a small part. Yeah, that's just the final tip to do, but that should be fine. I've covered the biggest part then, that should be okay. So I was really, really wrong in that regard. That last part of the pyramid is actually the most challenging and the most time-consuming one of all. So once you get all the prerequisites, what you do is you study, you collaborate, you validate that you're really on the right track, that you're looking to the right things, that you know the right information. Then you have this evaluation, which is the mini board. Then if you pass that one, you do mocks, you study, maybe sleep, hopefully sleep, and then you just repeat it all again until you go for the actual board. And then if you're lucky, it goes well. If you're not so lucky, it doesn't, and you have to go again. But I'll cover that. We'll get to that. So the pyramid, I don't want to waste too much time on this because this is all on the exam guide. But for anyone who didn't know, for the application architect, you have the data architect and management. It's now called data architect. I'm sorry, old slides, or Salesforce changing names, whichever is to blame. You also have the sharing and visibility. And then, of course, you have the dev one and the app builder. They say optional. You could do the Experience Cloud one as well. I will give you my 2 cents in a moment, what I think should be optional. With regard to the system architect, you have the development lifecycle, you have identity and access, integration, and also dev one. So if you do dev one, you're already 1 step on both pyramids. Yay! So yeah, 2 flies in one go. So they say that the Experience Cloud Consultant is optional, and they say the same thing about the administrator one. But to be honest, my recommendation is do all of these, because it will make your life a lot easier when you're actually preparing, because they really expect you, even though it's not specifically stated, but they do expect you to have core knowledge. So that for them, this means community, sales, service. Then you also will have likely a lot of data that you're covering, which will definitely exceed what you can do with standard reporting. So know a BI tool. It doesn't necessarily have to be Tableau CRM, to be honest, but it does. If you don't have any experience with a BI tool, I would say, yeah, then take a look at Tableau CRM, because it's one of the Salesforce products, so it would help. You don't need it to be an expert in field service, CPQ, Pardot, or Marketing Cloud, but you do need to know a bit of its capabilities so that you can at least see whether it's a good use case for the scenario, the business case that you're presented. And if it is, why are you or are you not using it? So at least that level of knowledge you should have so that you can understand whether or not it's applicable. Last weekend, I did the B2B solution architect. Boy, those questions were very, very long, but it did confirm what I was already suspecting, that actually these solution architects are very good practice, because they already require you to look at certain elements that you would have to look at anyway for the CTA, multi-cloud solutions, knowing, for example, what sales, service, CPQ, etc. features are, and seeing whether they fit a particular scenario, mini scenarios in that case or not. So I would really highly recommend them. I also put here those specific pyramids for the solution architect. So again, I think they are very, very good preparation, because they overlap so much with what you need to know when you're actually going for it. So highly recommend. So once you've got all of that, then it's time for the architect review board evaluation. Although, big note, I really would not advise to just get all the prerequisites and immediately jump into this one. You'll not have a fun time. It will not be a pleasant experience, because this really expects you to already have a bit of a notion on what is the exam like, what structure should you have, and you already have kind of a strategy on how you're going to solve and present those use cases, that business case that you will get. So this is something that you do, that once you are really already a bit more practiced, you have a good style, you have a good idea, and the format is similar to the review board, but it's shorter. So instead of the 3 hours that you would get for the actual board, here you get 1 hour, which is a scary amount of time to just solve. I think it's like 5 pages or something of requirements. I mean, yeah, on some levels, I found it even more challenging or more stressful to just get something done in 1 hour and then present it in 30 minutes, have a discussion again, 30 minutes, and then you can have some feedback and with the judge that is, judging you. It's one CTA. So at least there's that. There's not 3 people staring at you. It's just one in this case. But it's quite crucial because if you pass, you're kind of on a waiting list to get a date in 2 or 3 months. So that's again why they have this, to make sure that you are really ready, because doing the board when you're not prepared, that's what was happening before they made this mandatory, and a lot of people came really quite disillusioned because they might have not prepared enough, or it wasn't really, they didn't know what to expect. So I think it's a good thing that they introduced it, but a lot of people who are very close to going for the board when this was introduced, I heard them cursing all the way in Belgium. So I think a lot of people got a bit frustrated there, but in the long run, I think it's a good idea. Now, if you fail, you have to wait 6 months and then try this one again. So that's again why you really don't want to rush and do this before you are ready, because this is just the first step. Then you still have to do the real deal. So if you fail this and have to do it again, not that motivating for you, and you need all motivation you can get to pull and keep you going on this journey. As I mentioned, the exam is bigger. So it has, I think 7, I think that might be an optimistic number, might be more like 8 or above number of pages that you get in the scenario. You have 3 CTA judges and you have 180 minutes. So that's 3 hours to read. Fortunately, they do take into account people who are non-native. So if you're non-native like myself, you get additional time. So I think that's about 30 minutes for the preparation and 20 minutes additional for the Q&A. Now, I know that people have a bit of mixed feelings about having more time for the Q&A, because that's the scary part. That's where, all these smart people start to question what you have just presented very nervously to them, that you just took like 3 hours in a kind of frantic way to get something there. And now they're pulling the thread on, does this make sense? Which is very, very scary. So some people are like, oh, should I even get the non-native time? I don't want to have so long Q&A. I'm scared enough of the judges as it is. But I would really highly advise that you do, for 2 reasons. One, well, I know I'm quite confident in my, in my comprehension of English, but because it's not my native tongue, there are some jargon words or some things that still confuse me sometimes, or I need to read a few things a few times just because I don't know this industry well enough to really know this jargon by heart. Or maybe when they're asking questions, and then that's for the Q&A part, I need to ask them to rephrase a question just because I don't understand exactly what they mean, or maybe they don't understand what I mean. Lord knows I can, take a lot of time to explain very little. So sometimes it might just be that I'm wasting my time, and that they need to kind of like help me phrase it correctly. And that's the thing, that's a key word with regard to the Q&A. It's really, they are helping you. It's scary. I'm not going to say it isn't, because it will always be scary. But if you remember that their objective is really to help you make your solution better rather than to destroy it, I think it will help a lot. And because that's definitely my experience for my board, and I've been there twice, I did a retake, so I can tell. But they never were malicious, they never were mean, they were always trying to, help me see gaps in my solution and give me the opportunity to fix them, which will mean that maybe I wasn't doing so well on one section during the presentation part, but because they asked, I was able to fix it during the Q&A, and I did pass the section. So it is really, really, it's the best part, I think, of the review board. Do you get the results immediately like you do for Web Assessor? Unfortunately, no. That is really, really sad. You don't. You get it after a few weeks. So this means a lot of restless nights. I know I dreamt about this, I think, almost every day between doing the exam and getting the results. I think I dreamt every night that I got the email. I woke up. When I woke up during the night, I always checked my emails just to make sure. It's really nerve-wracking. But then you can get 3 types of results. You can get a pass, which is, hey, you're done. You did great. You're a CTA now. Now you can party and celebrate. You can get a partial pass, which means that you failed 1 or 2 out of the 7 domains, and you'll do a retake of those domains particularly, which is a good result. I think a lot of people would be happy with it. But for me personally, it was a bit of, oh crap, I have to get in that mindset again. I have to get in that routine again, find the energy to really go for that again. And it was, I'm not gonna lie, it took me a moment, but luckily I have awesome friends who were like, Lilith, you're being ridiculous. This is really good. Just do it. CTA all the way, right, Catherine? So if you fail, you have to try the full board again. So that is the most scary of all the outcomes. You do get results the way that you do also for Web Assessor. So you do get a bit of feedback on what was, what didn't go so well. You don't get the percentages or actual scores on how much you got for what part, but you do get very valuable feedback. And also this counts, by the way, for if you get a pass or a partial pass, you always get feedback, which when I got my feedback for my partial pass, I can't share too much because I'm under NDA, but it was confusing. I was like, you're saying this and I failed that. It took me the preparation, I think like 2-3 months of really studying the integration part, which was the domain I failed, by the way, to understand, okay, that was the mistake I made. And that's good because that's progress. If you're able to recognize your own mistakes, that's a win in my book. Right, then up for the retake. So if you have a 1-section retake, you get 75 minutes to read solutions. So it's, with regard to format, very similar almost to the evaluation, but there are still 3 judges going to judge you. So that's a bit different. You only have 20 minutes to present, which is, it flies by, is really crazy. And then you have 20 minutes for the Q&A. Now, if you're non-native, you get the full 5 minutes extra for preparation and Q&A, which also just flies by. So yeah, it's useful because any minute, any second counts. But on the other hand, yeah, I would have liked there to be like 15 minutes extra or something because it's not that much. Luckily for the 1-section retake, it's a focus scenario. So for me, it was shorter. It was really focused on only integration. So that made it more manageable for sure. I had no issue with the time management part, both for the actual first exam and the retake, but I have to really stress that I really trained myself very much on this time management part, because that was the thing that scared me the most. What if I run out of time? So that was definitely where I focused on. Now, the 2-section retake is actually, in my opinion, a lot more difficult, because not only do you have to still remember 2 sections, you get a standard scenario, but you only get 90 minutes to read and do everything, which is such a short amount of time. Plus, because it's just a standard scenario, you have to kind of pick what makes sense for the domains that you have to retake. So a friend of mine, for example, had data and integration. Well, that is already, a lot of the scenario is about those 2 things. Or if you have data and solutioning, poof. So this is really, really tough, to be honest. I don't envy anyone doing a 2-section retake, and I have heaps of respect for people who did that and passed, because I'm going to be honest and say I'm very, very happy I had the 1-section retake. The 2 sections scares me very much. Now, I've been talking about mock, scenario, use case, this thing with the many pages and the requirements, but what is it actually? So I put, a bit of an idea here, just a few paragraphs from one of the mock scenarios that Salesforce has released. So they release a few so you can practice, and this is the laptop to schools. And you can see here. Away. Oh, sorry, I think someone is unmuted. Okay, so first you get an introduction of who is your company, which is very useful because then are they, in which countries do they operate? It helps you kind of establish what kind of operating model they have, what kind of business model they have. And then one by one, they go through all these kinds of requirements, the business requirements that they have. For example, you have to have the ability to have a PDF being created, or maybe you see like, okay, normally they apply, their application process, for example, involves downloading a PDF from the website and emailing them. If only there was a Salesforce out-of-the-box feature that could help us with that, such as, I don't know, like web to lead, web to case, for example. So that's kind of what you're trying to get to when you're reading this, like what makes sense. But of course, if you go for web to lead, web to case, this means that for application, you already decided what object it will be. So a lot of implications, a lot of things to do, not that much time. What are the artifacts? What do you create? What are you actually presenting? Well, usually you're presenting the actors and licenses. So for example, I'll have sales managers and support agents. I'll also have some customers, and they will have sales service and customer community licenses, for example. And each of those, of course, come with their own implications because, well, if you're having a customer community license, for example, it limits kind of sharing you can do. If it needs to be more advanced or they need reporting or something, it has all these implications that you should know when you're presenting, because they will question if there's something wrong. You have to present what the role hierarchy will be because it's crucial for your security model, of course. You have to present your system landscape. What systems are there? Are you using middleware? Which type of middleware? How are they communicating with each other? What is the authentication flows? Your data model, data migration, integrations, you'll likely have LDVs, so large data volumes. How are you going to work with those? Your environment strategy. So of course, you're not going to create everything on production. That I think if you say that, you guarantee that you fail. So how are you going to tackle that one? And then your governance structure. So who are your stakeholders? How will you make sure that you have, for example, the compliance part covered? Or how do you know which priorities should be set? Who will be doing change management? Those kinds of things. So a lot to think about in very, very little time. And again, it really helps to do this very, very often and to have very good mocks. Like Kit, of course, is in the panel after me, and will explain perhaps how his study group really helps a lot of people on their journey. I know it definitely helped me to do some mocks. So that's the only way I think that you can go about it. So my disclaimer, which I think is really quite important. My journey it started, let's say, in 2019, or the first milestone, let's say, was 2019 when I got the application architect. A year later, I got the system one. And then in March last year, I did the evaluation. I did the full board in June. And then finally, I had to retake of my integration in September. And luckily, that's where the success part for me was. So that's really, really nice. But it takes a lot of time. And to be honest, looking back at how I covered some things, I would have loved to just have someone to tell me like, hey, watch out for this or that. For example, I was one of those people that really rushed and wanted to go through this pyramid as soon as possible. And, I'll get those certs and then not realizing that all the knowledge that you see in those prerequisites, you actually need later on. So it's much easier to just take your time for those, take good notes. It will save you so much time later. Now, this might be the scary part, my time, how much time I spend. Well, an average of 4 hours a day. And of course, there were some busier, less busy months. That's always the case, of course, but I spent about 1,200 hours. And that's really just starting after the prerequisites, after I've done all of those things. So that's starting, I think, like November or something. So it's, yeah, it takes a lot of time. And I think it's best that people know that not just people who want to go on the journey, but everyone surrounding them as well. I know I had to explain this to my friends and family, and I was lucky, so to say, that I was in COVID time, so there was no social life anyway. So I had less excuses to make, and I had more time to study and focus on this. But it takes a lot of, negotiating almost with the people around you so that they understand why you're spending so much time and why you might not be available for them the entire weekend, and why you have to say no to some social obligations. So I'd rather now, or if you know someone around you who is doing this, that you know why they're locking themselves in their cave, because that's really how it felt. I was living literally under a rock. Just, this was my life. So what did I actually do in that time? So I read a lot of Salesforce documentation, blogs, white papers, release notes. I completed a lot of trailhead trails, modules, project mixes, super badges, anything that I thought could be useful. I viewed a lot of videos, listened to a lot of podcasts, and even there, maybe a funny anecdote. One of the balancing acts that I did in finding time with my husband and still studying was listening to podcasts while we were gaming together. So still now, if I play like Satisfactory or Valheim, I still get, like flashbacks to those podcasts that I was listening to. I can't walk a certain hill in Satisfactory without thinking of Jakub and Johan, because that's where I was, when I was listening to their podcast. So yeah, those memories will stick with me forever, I think. Very important is also I joined a lot of study groups and a lot of mock exams. Yeah, I don't think there are many sessions from the Benelux group with Git that I missed. I tried to be there every time, even if I wasn't judging, because is really, really valuable also to see how other people are tackling it. You learn so much. So, and that, it shows. So these were just the mocks where I took an active role, let's say. So these were the ones where I was either judging or presenting, and both are very valuable experiences because, of course, when you're presenting, you're really training to do this at some point in the actual exam. But if you're judging, it really helps you also understand why people are going for a certain thing. It really helps you understand how people are looking from the outside in when you are presenting, and what may be very intuitive and work for you when you're presenting, but might not work at all as a judge, because it's a very different experience. So preparation and cat picks, that's where we are right now. So these are just kind of my tips. Now, I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to bore people who might not be really on this journey, but we can share the slides later. They have a lot of links to resources. So anyone, and if you have questions, you can always, reach out to me. I'm happy to help. So the first start is, finishing the prerequisites. As I mentioned, really take your time, take structured notes, because in the end, you will try to either have these summarized notes or high-level notes or whatever you want to call them, or you have kind of cheat sheets, anything. You are taking notes because you don't want to visit the same documentation page 20 different times. I can tell you, even with taking notes, you will still visit it about 5 to 10 times because someone says, no, I think it was that way. And then you have to look it up again just to make sure that you didn't make a mistake in your notes. So it really, really helps. And then when in doubt, try it out, because sometimes documentation says one thing, but when you try it, I can do this when I try it out, or maybe the documentation is not that clear. So how should I interpret this? Well, the fastest way is to just try it out and see for yourself. So these are some of the resources. Again, I won't go into too much detail. Take a look. If anything is unclear, reach out and we'll cover them together. Don't worry. Then once you've done that, the next part is, join study groups, because you really need to have those different perspectives and experiences, because maybe you were on a project that was very customer facing, but you've never done an integration, or the other way around. Maybe you were always the person involved in that part, but you never really talked to business, or you weren't that involved in the governance. So really having those different points of view, it will reduce how much time you need for your preparation, because you can really share and learn from each other. In the end, however, make sure that you also have smaller study groups, because you need that accountability. There will be days, so many days, where you're like, no, where did I get myself into? Why am I doing this? I see all my friends going out for movie night and I'm stuck looking at this documentation again. So there will be those days, and it helps if you have misery loves company. So if you have other people who are, in that same position, you can really boost each other up, and you can give that confidence where it's needed. And you can also make sure that you really do the things, because you're not just doing this research then for yourself, you're doing it for each other, which sometimes is just way more motivating. Also really look at what the training possibilities are. I know that quite a few companies have CTA academies, which I think is very smart of them, of course, because I grew so much during my journey to CTA. I learned so much, and I really approached projects in a different way. I took ownership. I was really a lot more involved in, for example, the risk management. If I saw something that would go wrong, I was way quicker at just saying, hey, watch out, we can have this or that problem. So I think there's a lot of benefits to a company for people doing or going for the CTA. Should that not be there, or if your company maybe some employer branding, mine is so awesome that it doesn't only have the CTA Academy, it actually also has the second thing, which is a Flow Republic coaching. So the Flow Republic coaching is something that I took, which I found really, really awesome, because it made my time so much more efficient. Now it is very expensive. So again, I'm not saying you have to do it. People have passed without this, but for me, it really helped. So for me, it was worth every penny or every euro cent. Then get a CTA mentor. I think this is also very good to have someone to kind of monitor your progress, to see, am I constantly making the same mistakes? Am I improving on something? I think it really helps, but definitely that's one thing. Still make sure that you get different perspectives, because if you always go to the one person to do mocks to judge your mocks, you will kind of like start gearing your presentation towards what they like and what they are very strong at, but they will not be in your judges panel. So yeah, you should have a broader audience there. And then make sure that you refine those cheat sheets, add new ones. For example, I didn't really dive into licenses before for the designer ones because it wasn't that relevant, or Salesforce Shield, but this became so relevant later on. So you'll definitely create some new ones too. And then start doing mocks. There's really no way about it. You have to practice. The first time I say, just do it without the time constraints, because it's scary enough already without the time pressure. But then, do it with also someone who is more experienced. They might be able to kind of tell you how to read in such a scenario, what to look out for, what are those hidden requirements, because not everything is like super clear always. And then write down what your timings are, so you can see where you have to improve your time management, be a judge, and present for different audiences. Again, a lot of resources. And then finally, you have to find your style. So you have to make sure that you have a flow that feels very natural. You have to draw by hand or digitally, whatever works for you. And then just repeat, try it, see what works, where you can save some time. And the scary part is when you schedule the evaluation. So that's the small one. If you pass it, you'll likely feel two ways. One is like super happy that you passed the evaluation, and one is like very scary because now it's real. Now you will get a date, in 2 or 3 months. And when you actually get the date, it's I needed a drink when I got that information, and I can imagine I'm not the only one. So it's really cool because then you finally have a very clear target to work towards, but it's also so scary because then it's real and you have to be ready by then. So final part, some misconceptions and even more cat jokes. Do you have to be an experienced developer before going for the board? This one I hear so much, and my answer is, to be honest, no, you don't. Because even though there are some technical parts to the exam, they're really not going to ask you how to write a particular piece of code. They are more thinking in the architectural sense. So it has to make sense, it has to work together. You have to know, of course, what coding possibilities there are, what issues you might run into, such as a mixed DML error, for example. Those things are important. You have to be aware of some limitations that developers usually bump against. But that's why the Dev 1 is also part of the pyramid, right? You have to know it a bit, but do you have to be like really a developer by heart or by role or by experience? No, a very resounding no. I think I covered this already. Is a CTA a technical exam? You need a lot of technical knowledge in order to stay within the time, but the CTA is actually not a technical exam, in my opinion, because so much boils down to communication, especially because the time is so limited. I've seen such smart people with such big and long and severe technical backgrounds go there and fail just because they were not able to convey their solution, or they were not able to, bring it in the time that was allowed. The thing to keep in mind is you only have so much time, and if you're not good at communicating, you will just lose that time. If the judges don't understand what you're trying to say, or if they ask you questions and you're not really answering them in a short, concise, and clear way, it's just, they're not going to pass. I'm sorry. You have to be able to communicate it. So that is one of the things that some people really do the most practice on. Might not be the technical part, but the communicative part. Are CTAs like walking encyclopedias? No. No, definitely not. Because you need to know a lot of things. But for one, we all know how exams work, right? So you need to know those these small details, but do you remember them afterwards for the rest of your life? Likely not. Plus, you also need to know information applicable to the particular exam, but this doesn't mean that you all of a sudden know everything about Salesforce. Definitely not. I know so many people who know so much more than I do who are not CTA. So yeah, that's no, definitely not. And this one is one that I fell into. I got my prerequisites, so I'm almost there. Really no. I had to put 2 cats here just to give an impression of how wrong this is, how wrong I was when I thought this. No, so the prerequisites are hard. I will not, say that these are easy exams, but that's just the very start of it. You need that knowledge. That's the basic knowledge that you need, but you actually need a lot more, and you need so much more practice. So yeah, when you get to prereqs, you're not almost there. I'm really sorry. But is the journey worth it? Yes. A lot of cat pictures, success babies, Oprahs. Yes, this is really, I think it's really worth it. Not necessarily for the title, although I'm not gonna lie, it's really cool, but mostly just because of the journey that you went through and the people around you. The people that I met along the way are really some of the people who are closest to me, who I feel the most fondness towards, because we were in this together. We struggled together, we learned together, we bounced back together also. So for me, this is really definitely worth it. I'm so much better as a professional, but also as a person, I think, because I put myself out there and I took the feedback. I really had to learn that feedback is a good thing, that it's not criticism on you, but it's something to help you improve. So yes, it's totally worth it. Look at the cats. I mean, so, and that was it. I hope I didn't bore anyone, but that was my side of the story that I wanted to share.
Woohoo! only your side of story is small. Oh, you're the CTA. I think that Desiree wants to connect with you right after, because she has questions, very specific questions, for example, about your note structure. How did you organize yourself, to see if there is a way she can improve of learning. So we know that someone is going there for sure.
Good.
There was also a question, does the exam change with the regular Salesforce releases that you have? It's announced that now new things are added, or how does it?
So that's a good question. So to be honest, well, two things. So the first thing is you have the releases that happen, right? So there's new features coming out. There's not really a Salesforce guideline on this, but the thing that, let's say, in the community is agreed upon is that you should know about the releases from at least 2 or 3 releases back. That definitely you should know. That should be common knowledge. Should you just, be very scared because you're going for the board right after a new release, so you won't have time to go through the notes? No, that's fine. Don't worry about that. The judges likely haven't read them either. But, you should at least, have a bit of a view on that. Now, with regard to the content of the exam, there are always rumors about, will it expand to also incorporate this or that cloud or whatever? But there, I'm afraid I haven't seen that change happen while I was preparing for it. I can't say it won't in the future, but yeah, that's to be heard from Salesforce.
Okay, and the question that I'm dying to ask, I'm really sorry, it's my question. What's next now? The CTA is the highest, so what's next?
Well, I spent my last weekend doing the B2B solution architect, so I have a few others on my list that I really, really want to do. Yeah, I will never stop doing those exams. But what is next is more or less really giving back. So I really love being part of the community. I really love doing mocks. And yeah, that's what I definitely will continue doing.
So the passing certification is not finishing with CTA? Okay.
You can choose to, it's not an obligation, but for me, yeah, I'm really such a nerd. I don't think I could stop if I tried. My husband was really, really hoping I would though, but yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other last minute questions for Lid? We had a few questions about CTAs and Kit was taking up answering them in the chat. That's why now the questions were limited. Now it's only appreciation, conversation, yeah, to see how people enjoy listening and how much they took over. I'm presuming that some people will connect with you to have more details if they and one question, did this open up career opportunities for you? That is a question from Sarah.
Yeah, and it did, to be honest. So, but one thing before I dive into the answer is I get this question a lot, like, should I go for CTA just to get a promotion? My answer really is no. If that is your sole motivation, I don't think you will, be able to maintain that level of dedication and motivation that you need, because it takes a lot out of you. So it does open a lot of things, but I think you should really look at it as a growing and learning opportunity, which undoubtedly will come with other opportunities. That's my point of view, but maybe I'm just a goody two shoes.
Okay, so last one, I promise. So how do you prepare for the communication requirements other than presenting live mocks?
Okay, so to be honest, that is a very big topic. It's a big can of worms to talk about, but I actually did a presentation on this for Apex Hours. So Kelly, let's connect separately. We'll watch it, and we can talk about it. But most of the tips with regard to communication I put there. Also, if you have any other questions, I try to write some LinkedIn articles about, how you can prepare. They're all on my LinkedIn. So if you want to take a look there, I try to share as much as I can.
Woohoo! We'll stop the questions for the moment to make sure that Lil can breathe a little bit and calm down with with talking, but she will stay with us, so we will ask more questions after our panel when we will have more people to answer questions. Tanya?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lilith. You know, I've seen the presentation when we do our dry run with Lilith. Well, I was impressed, but I'm impressed again with all the preparation that takes, and you know, it really is a great insight into what it takes to become a CTA.